Going live here in a second. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for watching this video. Really quickly, in the next handful of minutes, 20, 30 minutes, or however long George wants to stay around and just powwow, we're going to be talking about how George was able to scale up to $104,000 in just 4 weeks after starting with a lead to close system. Actually, it's a brand new business. We're going to be talking about how he was able to get $130 cost per booked call, 80% show up rates, the importance of qualifying your prospects. We're going to be talking about leveraging automations and all the AI stuff that's out there. So let's go ahead and dive right in. George, how are you?
Yes, sir. Doing great. Excited to see everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here, man. So the first place that I'd love to start is just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you got a marketing agency right now. I understand that that's not your first business that you started. So let's get the lay of the land. Let's kind of see where you were before this and what made you want to start this business.
Yeah, sure. So I've always had a career in marketing ever since I graduated college. So I'm not a newbie to marketing. And I had various corporate roles in working with different medical practices, which is the niche that we go after. And COVID hit, some things happened. There weren't a lot of job opportunities. Decided, hey, I know a lot about this stuff. I can help these smaller practice owners. Started an agency, ended up selling it. Had to wait a little while before doing some new things, and then wanted to take a lot of the mistakes, which there were a ton the first time I did it, and start fresh. And that's why we just started the new business, new agency, no clients, no case studies, no nothing. Just
so from scratch, just brand new.
Yes, from scratch. I mean, I wasn't selling cars yesterday and now doing a marketing agency today, but everything was new in terms of the company for sure.
Okay. What were some of the lessons? You said you had an agency before, kind of, made some mistakes. And I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah.
What were some of maybe the lessons that you learned? I think it would be good for everybody to hear. You always hear about entrepreneurs and business owners, how they've, like for me, example, I've started probably 4 or 5 businesses before I co-founded Conversionly and burned those bad boys to the ground. Like made a lot of mistakes. And
Yeah.
I think, sometimes a lot of people don't like to talk about that stuff. So what are a couple of lessons that you learned along the way?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing, a lot of the groups or coaching programs or things that you could potentially get into, a lot of the focus is always on sales, right? Sell, and worry about fulfillment later. And there's certainly value in doing that. But one of the things that happened was we didn't predict how fast we were going to onboard new accounts, and we didn't have our fulfillment in check. We started having a lot of fulfillment issues, being able to just do the work that we had promised. A lot of unhappy clients, a lot of refund requests, a couple lawsuits. So there was just a lot of things related to the fulfillment and just not hiring ahead. Like a lot of people, especially if you're new, especially if you don't have a ton of budget to start the business, you obviously don't want to be paying someone before they can start working, before you get revenue to support their salary and those things. But certainly that was one of the mistakes, is not hiring ahead. And now this go round, we're hiring ahead a ton for fulfillment. So that was definitely one. And then also just qualifying prospects, a lot of things with the sales funnel that I'm sure we'll get into over the course of the 20, 30 minutes. Also just a lot of contract stuff as well. You get into a couple lawsuits with some folks, and you learn quickly what should or should not be in the contracts and how to deal with that. And then also just setting the proper expectations with the clients and understand where they're coming from. A lot of times, if you don't set very clear expectations with clients, they'll set it themselves, and it's usually ones that you can't deliver on or are very difficult to deliver on, and that causes a lot of friction within the relationships.
It's funny you say that. There was a time right after COVID, maybe before or during COVID, there was a book that was published, and I'm sure everyone knows this book. It's all about offers. And once that book was published, I know exactly, you know exactly which book I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Once that book was published, man, there was everyone out there that was doing these crazy guarantees and just saying, hey, we're able to help you do this and do that. And I think that author probably should write a second volume of that book that talks about like the chargebacks and the refund requests and all of that, because what people were doing is they didn't have the back end fulfillment process to fulfill for all these crazy guarantees. And then a lot of people were getting burned. Like even clients that we have now today, you know, they're like, hey, I've tried marketing agencies, or I've tried lead generation, I've tried paid ads, I've tried sales systems, and it just doesn't work. And you know, I think we'll kind of get into this here in the next couple of minutes, but there's usually a difference. I always say there's a good way, a better way, and a best way to do things, right? And sometimes like there's a fourth option. There's a bad way. There's a bad way to do things. Right. So, and I'm not saying that's you, but there are a lot of companies out there, especially in the space that we're in, right, with marketing lead generation that not necessarily like take advantage of people, but they are writing checks that they can't cash.
Yeah. And we knew what we were doing. We just didn't have the staff to literally do the work. But yeah, I mean, once that came out, you know, ton of people over promising, under delivering, and it just makes the job for everyone else harder, because it's a big objection when people have, you know, when they've been burned in the past, they're going to have a lot of doubt. It's going to be a big objection. It's just ironic that the way to get around that objection is to do the stuff in that book and have an offer and have a guarantee. It's weird how it works out, but it's definitely been an interesting last couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. So you started the business, and I guess like, what all did you try as far as like the client acquisition model, right? So, you know, we're here, like most people are listening to this video, you know, they're really interested in generating leads, turning more of those leads into appointments and growing and, you know, client acquisition systems and stuff like that. So what have you tried in the past that maybe like didn't work, or maybe didn't necessarily have like the right systems behind it?
Yeah. So the two primary ways that I've typically relied on is paid ads and cold outbound, and that would encompass email, texting, and cold calling. And you know, it's worked to some degree, kind of like you said. There's a good, better, best. Like they did work, but I'll give you an example with the paid ads. We had no financial qualification in our first go round. We had no actual funnel. It was really just one landing page with an offer, and embedded on that page was a scheduling link. So there was no lead capture, followed by a VSL, followed by a bunch of education. So basically what would happen is someone would book a call, and the calls were relatively cheap. I think at this time they were around $80 a call. But when they got on the call with the salesperson, they literally had zero context outside of one headline about the business, which makes the sales a lot harder, because you're not really closing at that point. You're just educating, and you're really trying to sell.
It's like a discovery call.
Just close. Yeah, I mean, even on the discovery call, right? Like, hey, here's this headline offer to get this outcome, book a call. That's literally all that you know. And that's one of the things that, you know, one of the shifts that has allowed us to be successful after working with Conversionly is the fact that, you know, we started to realize the importance of the funnel, educating folks before, understanding that it was okay to pay a higher cost per call if the intent and the close rate and all the other things were going to be higher. So that was definitely a shift, and you could say a mistake, kind of that we made around the first go round. And then on the cold side, you know, it was really just about the volume, right? Like,
yeah,
you have to send however many emails, calls, texts, whatever you're, you know, LinkedIn outreach, whatever you're going to be doing. Whatever you think you need to do, just exponentially increase it. You know, it obviously depends on the quality of the list and the offer, and there's a lot of variables. But just in general, we just weren't doing enough volume, and we also didn't have the proper scripts. That, you know, I know a lot of what's in the program that has helped us on the cold outbound side is the scripting and just a general way to outreach to these people versus just, hey, here's our offer. Are you interested? You know?
Yeah, it's tough because I've even been in that situation. I had a marketing agency before I started this company, and I tried ads before, and it was just me and like watching a bunch of YouTube videos and just listening to some other people like on Facebook and posts and stuff like that. And it's funny because you try something and then you're like, I don't know, Facebook probably doesn't work. But like in the back of your mind, you see people having success with it, and it's like, okay, well, there's got to be a process that they're using, right? And what it really comes down to is it's not, to your point, right? Sales as a whole, you got to look at it as an entire picture, right? There's 4 steps, right? Generating the lead, that's what everyone thinks about, right? When they think about marketing. And then there's 3 steps after that. Booking the call, like trying to get someone to turn from a lead to an appointment, right? Getting them to show up to the call and then closing that deal, right? Now, the lead generation is just the first part, right? A lot of people are like, these leads are crap. These leads are this, these leads are that. I was like, oh, well, what's happening after? You know, what's your engagement sequences like? Like what process are you putting them through?
Yeah.
You know?
And that was a big thing. Also, another mistake is, once we got the folks on the call, we had a 2-call close. So a discovery, and then we'd have a follow-up, pitch, and close.
This was your last agency?
This was the, yes.
Okay.
And, there was just a lot of holes in the bucket, if you will, right? Like if you got on the discovery call, you got on that follow-up call, if you didn't close, you might as well have been dead, right? So like there's a lot of stuff in that process. Like, yes, there's 4 steps, but there's also a lot of different things that I'm now understanding that need to happen in between the steps to actually make them successful and make the sales process efficient. And a lot of them are going, through automations and things that I'm sure we'll talk about. But most people are just like, hey, I get a lead. Does it close? If it doesn't close, or it doesn't show, it's a bad lead. But like, there's a lot of factors that determine, whether or not they're going to become a lead, they're going to book, they're going to show, they're going to close. There's so many different things that are within your control as the business owner that you can do to improve those numbers that you may not necessarily think about.
Yeah, they just don't know. And that's where every consultant or someone who knows something that has like, hey, I know this is how you do it, right? And there's always like a value exchange, right? It's usually money for information, right? Now, in that process there that you explained, like those 4 steps, it's easy to say that, but the whole part about turning leads into appointments, there's usually like 3 ways that you can do that. There's 3 layers to that, turning leads into appointments. Number 1 is like getting the funnel dialed in, right? So that they self-book. That's number 1. Like getting them to go from the ad to the landing page, go to like a form that's qualified so that you're meeting with people who are quality, right? They want what you have to sell and they can't afford it. And then getting them to show up, right? So like self-booking. Number 2 is like what happens to those people that opted in, that you generated that lead that did not book, right? So that's where the systems and the processes and the sequences and all of the messaging, the follow-up stuff comes in. And then number 3 is like, there's people that need that extra push. There's people that need someone to actually give them a call and go back and forth with them on text message or qualify them, through a personal phone call. And that's where the like inbound appointment setter that, we always recommend comes in, right? That's how you go from industry average is like 13 to 18% booking rate to 30 and 40% booking rate, which is what we're seeing, right? And you're seeing, and most of our clients are seeing. Now, what do you feel like is the biggest factor to the difference with your old agency and what you're doing now that helped you get to that $104,000 in 4 weeks, which is amazing, by the way. And I don't want Conversion Lead to take all the credit because like we build all the stuff for you, but you're the one that actually has to execute that, right? So kudos to you, George. But
Yes,
what do you feel like is the biggest difference between what you were doing before and what you're doing now?
I think there's kind of 2 parts to it. I think the first is within the offer itself. It definitely plays a key role in terms of how we're differentiating ourselves from competitors, to kind of reduce the barriers, make it easy for people to want to do business with us. And then the second piece is really the funnel and the sales system, the automations, the appointment setter. I mean, it's a night and day difference, and it allows you to optimize those different steps. Whereas before, I was just doing, I was basically just optimizing my whole business around a cost per booked call. Didn't matter if they show, didn't matter if they closed. I thought that the lower I got that number, the better off I was going to be. And I think that's one of the biggest transitions is understanding that, putting friction into the sales process in strategic ways is going to benefit you. And working with a team like Conversionly to get some guidance around that. Those were the two biggest shifts that we made.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. When we kind of first was dialing everything in, we did the same thing. It was like cost per book call, cost per book call. And then we came to the realization, it's like, it's not really like, that's not the KPI that we want. What we want is cost per offer, meaning like, okay, we got 5 sales reps. Every single person is booking 6 calls on their calendar 2 or 3 days in advance, right? We got an 80% show up rate. Now, like that's the real quality metric, right? How many of those people that you're speaking to are you giving an offer to? Meaning like when you get on a sales call, you go through the discovery, you're like, okay, this person is definitely a fit. Let me go ahead and pitch him and then give him the price. And then that's an offer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you could have 90, 80, $70 cost per booked appointment, but like everybody is just not great quality and your close rate is low, but everything else looks good, but it's because of the quality that you're pushing through, right? So it's a big picture.
Yeah, like right? just for comparison, like originally our cost per book call was like high 70s, $80. Our show rate was like 50%. Our close rate was abysmal for 5%, if that. And all those things add up. And just looking at it a lot differently in terms of, the cost that you're doing to offer or ultimately the cost you're paying to acquire the customer. But it's easy at the beginning to focus on the first step in the process. Like we were talking about earlier, most people just focus on lead gen. That's great because it's the first thing in the process, so it makes sense. But then, you quickly learn or need to realize that there's just a lot more things involved.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I think, that is the first step in the process. That is something that you need to dial in. But we're probably going to beat a dead horse here, but you got to think about the sales process and marketing process as an entire picture. And the fun part about this is it's almost like you're playing a video game, right? Because if you know your numbers and you know your KPIs, then that will tell you, right? If I know, okay, cool, my cost per booked appointment is where it needs to be, sub 200. And my show up rate is 80%, but then my close rate is 10, 15%. What we want it to be is around 20. Then we know we may have a messaging problem, right? We're maybe not getting the right people in, or we have a messaging problem on the sales call, or it could be the sales reps, right? Now, if we see that when, let's just talk about like the funnel process, right? So if we got someone who's landing on the page and our KPIs, we want 20, 30% of those people who land on the opt-in page to go to the next step. And it's like 5%, then we know there's a disconnect in the opt-in page and the ad. And they say, okay, cool. That tells you what you need to fix. And so there's some clients that will hop on the call with us and like, hey man, like I'm doing everything that you ask me to do, but how come it's not working for me? And I'm like, bro, listen, like the difference between our system and your system is like minuscule. We're running the same exact system. The only difference is we've had to go through the suck. And usually that suck takes time to dial things in, right?
Yeah.
And you got to figure out like all those steps and all those numbers. If you don't know those numbers and you don't have someone that can kind of push you in the right direction to get the numbers as quick as possible, then it makes it very difficult. And that's where a lot of people start to maybe try to give up. Is they kind of know what to do maybe, but then they're not pushed in the right direction at the right time. And it's very hard and very difficult. And then they burn through cash and they don't know like what levers to pull to reach those KPIs.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that having the right expectations going in and understanding like, all these different opportunities to start companies or get book calls and all those things, like everyone's going to flash their numbers. But what you don't see in the background is everything else that they did to, get to those numbers. Like I saw something the other day. Oh, I cut my ad spend to 0 and still booked 1 million calls. Well, yeah, that looks flashy, but it's because you have a lead list of 5,000 people that you can now text that you paid for previously. So, cool, you took your ad spend to 0 this month, but that doesn't mean you spend $0 and get a bunch of leads, right? But some people just see that. So it's all about just understanding the expectations, having the patience, and I think most importantly, having somebody guide you, right? Because you are going to spend money. And from my experience, the previous business and this one, you don't spend money and get instant results, right? So like if you're going to spend $200-$300 and expect you're going to land a client, and if you don't land a client, you're going to be in a bad spot. That's not like a recipe for success, because you have to kind of go step by step, layer by layer, working through things. And it does take a little bit of time. But once it clicks, it's 100% worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I kind of struggle with is like, I just want to show everybody like the things that you need to do. And obviously like we have a company, and that's, we got to make a little bit of money, in the marketplace. What I guess in your process with, going through what you did before and kind of knowing what you did now, what was your process like with learning about like these systems or Conversionly, and then actually like going through the buying process with us? Like what were maybe some like limiting beliefs that you felt like you had, or things that you were kind of struggling with before you made the decision?
Yeah. Well, I think from an infrastructure standpoint, I understood that having a sales funnel was important. I understood the power of paid ads. So I had like a base level knowledge that these things are important, and I didn't need buy-in there. But I was using a lot of different systems that were trying to talk to each other, right? I didn't have one centralized system that handled everything. So there was a lot of technology upkeep, a lot of integrations and Zapiers and webhooks and all these different things. And it made it very hard to see the math as leads flow through the funnel, because all the different steps are in different systems. So I think with Conversionly, I saw initially an ad on Facebook, and it had the graphic of the calendar with a bajillion appointments, and I was just thinking to myself, hey, like I kind of directionally already know how to do this stuff. Let me see if I can go through their sales funnel, learn something. Maybe I pick up a nugget on their VSL, right? Like I was just in that mindset. I wasn't in like, oh my God, I need to buy this today type of mode. And, everything looked good. I ended up booking a call. And I think one of the limiting beliefs that I had, just to be brief, is thinking that I could do it all myself. And more importantly, that was the better option, right? Because there's things like YouTube. There's plenty of free information out there on a variety of different topics. And I think that the switch that I needed to make was understanding the value of having a system where they had already gone through the pain points. They had already figured it out. They had already done the upfront work to build out all of the templates based on the best practices. They already knew how to use the software, right? Like, could I have physically done it? Could I have like reversed engineered your funnel and watched one of these videos and went to their funnel and then probably I could have done that, but at what cost? Over what period of time? Would it have worked? So I think that was the biggest limiting belief that really made me kind of change my mindset and end up deciding to work with you guys, was just recognizing the value of having someone that has, proven to do it for you, and just the value of time and focus on other things.
Yeah, 100%. And then when you had everything built out and everything started, like when did you start seeing results? Like how quickly did that happen for you?
Pretty instantly. As soon as we turned the ads on, we started getting leads. And then, we started getting book calls shortly thereafter. I mean, the leads started coming in literally the first day. I think it was maybe 3 or 4 days in that we got our first book call. And then things just started to ramp from there. And obviously there's always a lot of improvements, right? So, even once you start getting book calls, there's tons of other things to improve. But yeah, the results were, I would say, pretty immediate.
That's awesome. And what do you feel like, what was your experience with like just seeing that turn on and start seeing leads come in and appointments go? Like where do you feel like your mindset was at with, okay, this is what I got to do. Or I guess a better question would be like, where were a couple of spots where you like, maybe you didn't think about that you were like, oh, wow, that's wild. That's crazy.
I mean, I think the whole concept of a lead and a booked call being different was something that I had to wrap my head around, because I had just been used to straight to a booked call. And part of that was I didn't have the infrastructure to be able to properly capture the leads. So if they didn't self-book, they had no value to me because I didn't have the infrastructure to take advantage of them. So I think that was a big mind shift. And then also just going through the process and having patience, waiting for it to evolve, right? Because you start getting leads, then you start optimizing your cost per lead. Then you start getting book calls. Then you start optimizing for cost per book call. And like I was saying earlier, just the patience and trust. And it also gave me a lot of confidence, the media buyer. So for those of you who don't know, someone runs the ads from Conversionly for you. And I was just really impressed with the media buyer. I have been doing Facebook ads for a very, very long time for big brands that you guys will have all shopped in. So I know how to do Facebook ads. And I had some limiting beliefs also around like the media buyer, how good are they going to be, like all these sorts of things. And, we were in lockstep, 99, if not 100% of the time, which really gave me a lot of confidence to go figure out the rest of the business, because I knew, and I had also been burned by myself previously, right? Where I got a bunch of clients and then didn't have the fulfillment. So as soon as I started, things started to take off, I kind of had some confidence there, especially that you guys were going to be, looking at it day to day. And then I was able to go turn my energy and be like, okay, I know these things are going to come in. Let me not mess up what I messed up last time.
Yeah. And then one of the other biggest things, so like, that's a great point. The media buyer in your account, he's amazing. And it's good to have someone to just, even if you are experienced running ads, just to have another, set of eyeballs on the account that's maybe worked with people in your industry and like knows all the hiccups and knows what buttons to push and stuff like that, and angles to kind of hit on, the creatives to use and copy to kind of tweak. And so, that's obviously one part. It's a lead gen part. And then like, there's a whole sales system. And a lot of times people come in and they're like, I'm terrible at following up on my leads. And that's probably one of the biggest, we did a big study, and, obviously the data shows that if you follow up at least 6 times and try to call them in the first 5 or 10 minutes, like drastically increases the chances of those KPIs and those conversion rates. Right. So what was your experience like? And when did you implement the appointment setter, the person that is, the inbound appointment setter that's following up with all those leads?
Immediately. Right. Like,
okay. So you started off with the lead gen and the appointment setter at the same time.
Yeah. So I worked with, your team to figure out when the funnel was going to be ready and had a start date. And actually the funnel was ready and the ads and everything were ready before the setter was in place. So we actually held launching for like 6-7 days until the setter was in place and trained. And we launched them congruently.
Yeah. That's such a peace of mind to know that like when you have leads and you're spending money on leads, right? And we've done a calculator video not too long ago, and it was like, okay, cool. If you spend $1,000 on, or $3,000 on Facebook ads, right? And you get like this many leads and you put it through our system versus the other guys, like with the same amount of ad spend, it's like a 300x return versus like what we were doing with like 13 to 18% 13 to 18% conversion rate from lead to booked appointment. And then like an increase of from 50 to 80% show up rate, right? And then all of that with the appointment setter and knowing that, okay, I'm spending money on these leads. I need to have someone who's dedicated to following up with these people so that, KPIs for our appointment setters are 5 appointments per day, as long as they have a healthy lead flow.
Yeah, that's what we did too. Your team was also very helpful in setting up the KPIs for the setter. So, it's not just, hey, go place me a setter, which you guys did, but it's also, how do I manage this setter? How do I set the expectations? Like, I had never used a setter in my life.
Yeah.
And so, understanding what expectations should I set, KPIs. I'm like, hey, here's what I'm planning on spending on the ads, guys. Here's the forecasted cost per leads and all that stuff. We kind of ran through the funnel and said, okay, here's the goal that we want to set in terms of appointments. And like, I think people sometimes are afraid to pull the trigger, but the appointment setters that you guys place, at least from my experience, they do not require much training, if at all. Most of the training is on the offer, your business, your customers. It's nothing to do with how to follow up with leads. That part is relatively smooth. And then depending on what you're spending on the ads, I mean, it's just miss money on the table to not have one, right?
100%.
It is an incremental cost in the beginning, but like, I think, you spend $1,000, $1,200 a month on a full-time setter. That's good. Even if they're getting you one booked appointment a day, I mean, that's a joke in terms of the cost that you're actually paying for that booked appointment that you wouldn't have gotten if you don't have them in place.
Yeah, going back to the 3 layers, right, through paid ads. 1 is like self-booking through the funnel. Number 2 is like they went through the funnel but didn't book, and then like they got the automated messages and then they self-book again. And then the other, like each layer, you're going to get appointments on your calendar from each layer. And then the other layer is the appointment setter. And then now all of a sudden you got an additional 5 more appointments. That's enough for a full-time sales rep.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now our setter is booking about probably 3 to 4 appointments a day. So let's just say 3, like 90 appointments makes $1,000. Like, unless you can go get that cost per booked call elsewhere, it's pretty advantageous for you to set that up.
And I know you talked about ads versus outbound. There are really only 6 ways that you can bring in new clients. And the way that is our favorite is ads, right? Because it's so scalable and it's a different conversation. A lot of people use setters as like outbound setters, right? Going out and messaging people and trying to bring them in. It's just a different conversation when you have someone who's opted into an ad and coming through your funnel and they've came to you and using an inbound setter to have a conversation with them, right? The success rate's way higher because it's just a different mindset versus you going out to somebody and like cold DMing, cold calling, cold messaging, all that stuff is cold, which no one wants you to do that, right? But this person is opted into an ad, gone through a funnel, and then now this person is calling them about the thing that they wanted, which is normally around like, the big transformation that they're looking for. Right?
Yeah. And we do, most of the setters activities are reaching out to inbound leads. And then also setting appointments, confirming appointments. They're doing a whole host of things that you guys train them how to do. And then in the downtime, she is doing prospecting. And then the automations handle the outreach. So let's say cold texting people, cold emailing people. And then she is able to service the responses. But, I mean, the bread and butter is the paid ads. And I can see if there are budget constraints, why starting cold email and cold text and other things would be a more attractive option. But I think as quickly as you are financially able, the ads are. There's no other way to get the leads at that scale when you're starting out, right? There's arguments for doing other things later once you have a bunch of customers and other things, but starting out, like, there's nothing that compares to it.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk about $130 cost per book call. What do you feel like was like, the number 1, number 2 lever to pull to get to that?
So I think just split testing, which you guys help clients do, is very important. Split testing the opt-in page, split testing the VSL, the booking page, maybe, but those first two things, split testing those are very, very important. I mean, and it didn't start at $130, right? It started higher and it comes down, but there's a lot of different levels to pull. Split testing the opt-in page is probably the easiest one, where you're going to get the most results in the quickest amount of time, followed by the VSL, and then also the creative and how to structure the ads, right? There's no one way to run Facebook ads, Instagram ads, TikTok ads, whatever it is. There's no one structured way that works. I would say there are a few that generally work better than others, but there's a lot of split testing and audience segmentation and different creative and a lot of different things that happen to optimize there. But you have to keep in mind too that the more money you're able to spend, the faster you get the results, right? So like that was another big shift for me. Like you said, 3,000, right? So if my budget is $3,000 in a month, I'm the type of person that wants to spend it in a week. Why do I want to do that? Yeah. Because I'm going to get the data faster, and then I'm going to be able to use that to increase my trajectory versus waiting.
I always say you can make more money. You just can't get more time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So to your point, like putting more money into the funnel so that you can, because there's thresholds, right? You don't want to look at how a funnel is performing, how ads are performing, unless you like put so many people through that, right? Like for example, you want like 500 people through the funnel and get 500 people on the page before you determine whether this is a good opt-in or not, like what you need to change.
Yeah. Right? And it doesn't, it's not like the results are atrocious, right? When you start out, right? We're talking about good numbers versus great numbers. We're not talking about, blowing $3,000 and nothing happening. That's certainly
like 16% opt-in rate to like a 25.
Yeah, like I think when we first started running, we had about a 15% opt-in rate on the opt-in page, and then now we're up to high 20s. And
I was just looking at it. I think you're like 26, 27. Yeah.
We're at like mid to high 20s for the opt-in, and then I think our self-booking rate on the VSL is 25%, something around there as well. And then obviously the setter closes a percentage of books a percentage of those also.
We're testing some cool stuff right now to like we got our opt-in page up to like 30, 33. I'll have to share that with you after this. But so your cost per call, obviously our like KPI that we want to reach is, now this is a KPI across, we work with a lot of different industries, right? So normally cost per call, you want to sub 300, right? So you're sitting at 130, which is really good. I think we're sitting at 140. I think I looked this morning, 149. Now your 130 is good because you have so much friction in the funnel, right? Now when I say friction, what I mean is like to what we normally recommend to have really high quality appointments on your calendar is they land on a page and it's an opt-in page where they got to enter in their information, go to a page to learn a little bit more about your offer, normally with like a 4 or 5 minute VSL, and then maybe some other like social proof stuff like that. And then they go into another page to book an appointment. And now what we recommend is you have anywhere between 2 to 8 qualification questions to make sure you're weeding out the people who aren't good fits, and then they can book a call. Right. So the more friction that you add in, usually the higher your cost per call is, but the higher quality that you have. Right. Now, before, George, when you said that you were going from lead to booked appointment page, and it was probably just name, email, and phone number, your cost per appointment was probably really low. And I think you even said that earlier, but the quality was not great. Right. So there's like kind of like a push and a pull there. So your $130 cost per call is really good considering all the friction that you have.
Yeah. And we had, we did with the first one, we did have a couple questions, but it was more kind of pre-discovery questions for sales. It wasn't necessarily qualifying questions. But we definitely put a few in place for the new funnel with you guys. One of them was a financial qualifier, which has definitely helped. And honestly, it hasn't impacted the conversion rate the way that I thought it would. I thought it
Yeah.
was going to have a bigger impact on the conversion rate, and it hasn't. And the other piece of it too is the targeting, right? Like it's kind of a balance there. Like if you have a very broad audience in your targeting on the ads, you need more qualification questions versus if you're able to dial in the ad audiences at a more granular level, you can kind of get the same result with less qualifying questions. So it's just a give and take, like depending on your market and who you're going after and how you're able to target them.
Yeah, 100%. And I think to your point, and the targeting, I think that's one big part. But what I feel like is a even bigger part is your creative.
Oh yeah.
Like, so I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that you can do, button pushing and like targeting people in audiences and stuff like that. But I think your creative probably, I mean, maybe even 70% of the ad comes from the creative. Like the quality of the leads come from the creative. Like, is that video, is that image, is that copy, is that headline, is it speaking to the person who has that pain point and is the person that you're looking for, right? And then that's how you get them to stop, look at it, click the button, want to actually fill out their information to learn more. And then on the the VSL page, you're like, oh, okay, I actually want to speak to this person for this offer, right? And that, I mean, if you can get someone to think my time is better spent speaking to this company than folding the laundry, picking up the kids, checking emails, doing everything else, then you're not ever going to have to worry about a booked appointment problem or a show up problem or a sales problem for that point.
Yeah, I completely agree. The importance, the creative is probably the number one lever. It hasn't always been that way, but the algorithms have gotten so good on the ad platforms now that that's really it used to be more audience heavy. Now, like the creative is a huge factor. And what's interesting that we've noticed is different audiences, the creative that they respond to is different, right? So you would think, generally speaking, like business owners, as an example, like what works for this business owner is probably going to respond good to this business owner. But once you kind of build it out and segment it and the way that your media team sets up the account, it's amazing to see the variance between different types of creative that are relatively similar in terms of the offer and the structure and how they perform depending on who's seeing them. Because we've been at $130, but we have some that are 80, we have some that are 190, right, and everything in between. And it's all just different combinations of the creative that we're able to test out. And your team is also good at one, building the creative up front, the images, or if it's a video, giving the scripts, but also identifying and pinging me like when new creative is needed, what I should tweak, handling the video editing. Like there's a lot of things that probably folks don't know that you guys have in the program that helps out, right? Like video editing is just an example of something where I shot it, you gave me this relative script, I shot it, kicked it back, and now all the formats and all the resolutions and all the stuff is there, and I didn't have to sit there in whatever software for 6 hours doing it.
Yeah. So that was a $130 cost per book call. Let's talk about the 80% show up rate. Now, a lot of people, like industry average is around 50%. There's some people who have like 30% show up rate. And through all the things that we've talked about and what we implement, we normally see anywhere north of 70% show up rate, right? So what do you feel like has lent its hand to that 80% show up rate that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think it's three things. First is the friction in the funnel or the experience in the funnel. So the more time someone is spending with your brand before booking the call, the higher likelihood they're going to show because they're more invested. So I think, switching to an opt-in, then a VSL, then a scheduling page, just that in general system gives you a lift. I think the next thing is all of the automations that come into that. So sending out reminders, sending out confirmations. If they, reply yes to the confirmation, different things happen versus if they reply no. Identifying opportunities to send them content before the call to get them excited. The third thing would be the human outreach. So we do it two different ways. The setter, for anyone who hasn't confirmed their call, the setter has the list that they can easily see in the system that you guys set up. to reach out to those people. And then also my sales guys are also personally reaching out to the prospects the day before to introduce themselves, say how excited they are to speak with them, et cetera, et cetera. So it's the structure of the funnel, the automations, and then the human touch.
Yeah, it's not rocket science. I mean, it's just things that you kind of test throughout the process, and it's funny because it's all every. The more I learn about marketing and sales, the more I realize it's just all about human psychology and persuasion, right? It's not like you're swooning somebody with the words that you use or you're using a secret tactic. No, it's just like there's certain things that you need to do and certain steps along the process to get people to do the things that you want them to do. Right. So, okay, cool. So, let's see, let's talk about, I think I'm just looking over the bullet points and all the
Sure.
things that I promised that we would hit here. Is there anything else that you feel like, I mean, we talked about the $130 cost per call, 80% show up rate, qualifying your prospects, optimizing your sales process. What other I guess like golden nuggets do you feel like would be beneficial maybe to hit on as we
Yeah,
wrap up?
I would say a lot of people focus on split testing to get the leads and get the booked appointments. But one thing that I would recommend folks do not overlook is split testing for the show up rates and the close rates more than the front of the funnel. Obviously, you're going to do the front of the funnel because it's first, but for example, we have a piece of content that is not our VSL. It's a video. It's a little bit of a longer video. And every single person who has closed has watched this video. Every single person that has showed an appointment has watched this video. And one of the common traits of the people who do not show or do not close, they have not watched this video.
Yeah.
And so whether it's a video or it's a downloadable or it's whatever that asset is, I think injecting that into the back half of the funnel to pick up on those insights is a game changer, because there's the cost per book call, but the show rates, how much is it costing you to get an offer out, to close a deal? Like the further down the funnel is where more of the leverage is. And if you can focus on that, dial it in, then you can spend more money on ads. You can test other things at the top of the funnel. It just opens up a lot of things. And I think it's overlooked. And a lot of times people think, oh, well, my sales team sucks because they're not closing, or my setter sucks because, these appointments aren't showing. But it's not just, hey, we're sending them a text message. It's what is in that text message.
The content.
The content is much more important than the fact that you're just sending them something.
Yeah. I remember when we implemented that in our business and we were like, hey, this is working really well. So we started sharing that with all of our clients. I read a lot of books on sales and marketing and human psychology, about 3 or 4 a month. And I just always just consuming different things to grab new ideas and always find like 2 or 3 golden nuggets to implement. There was a book written by Robert Cialdini called Persuasion, right? So this is everything that so he wrote a book. I forget what the title was. It was Persuasion or something like that. And it's like when you're talking to somebody, how to persuade them. Now he wrote a book after that. It's called Persuasion. It's essentially like everything up until the point where you have a conversation with them and what happens and how all of that stuff has an effect on the outcome of whatever thing you're trying to get them to do. So for our, what we're talking about here is like getting them to show up to the call and then also getting them to close, right? And that's a very good example, a perfect example of getting them that video so they're in the right mindset and so they understand your offer. And then sometimes that video disqualifies the people who weren't going to close anyway. So you can remove that person from your sales team's calendar and fill that with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So yeah, great point. So, well, hey man, I think we went over a little bit longer, almost an hour here. We were slotted for 30 minutes. I hope everyone's okay with us going over. Hopefully we're able to share some gold nuggets that you guys were, able to take away from the video. George, is there any last things that you want to say before we hop off?
No, I appreciate you having me on, and more importantly, appreciating the support from Conversionly. I'm grateful I was able to make the mental shift and go from just shopping your funnel to actually becoming a customer. um, so yeah, just hope the video helps everyone. And yeah, I'm sure if there's any questions after you watch the video in the group, the team will be able to hit you back with the answers.
Yeah, absolutely. But dude, I'm looking forward. You're only 4 weeks in, 104K in revenue. That's freaking amazing. You made a post inside of our Inner Circle Facebook group, and you were saying you're looking to dial some stuff in. So I'm looking to dial some stuff in with you and seeing where we can take this bad boy. So I'm excited to work with you moving forward. And yeah, we'll go ahead and end the live. I hope everyone enjoyed this video, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Adios. See you guys.